All right, we're back, and it's COMP213, and it's week 8, lesson 8, and we're also going to say part 3, right? Because I'm re-recording this part 3 that I had recorded earlier. So last time we talked about a couple of technologies, HTML5, CSS3 with Visual Studio 2013 Ultimate with Update 4, and Visual Studio Web Essentials. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at those things. I had a brief discussion just now. I'll look at my apples before coming up. And again, Visual Studio Web Essentials, if I was to go there, just to remind you guys where to see it, for those people who have seen it. The great thing about this is it gives you different tool sets. One of them is an HTML5 enhancement, just a bunch of different things. One of them that I talked about last time was Zen Coding, and I also talked about Lorem Pixel. There's also other ones. We might talk about these today. Placehold it, and this Lorem Ipsum generator I kind of showed you last time when I used the key term or keyword lorem and a number, right? There's all kinds of other command sets and everything else. We'll probably get into them a little bit at a time, but these are just enhancements for the IDE, which is Visual Studio 2013, or more, or greater. So that's kind of the one thing. So it has HTML stuff. It also has stuff for CSS style sheets. And here's this one. For example, it can generate different things, vendor-specific CSS. It'll help you generate vendor specifics. If you're not using Visual Studio 2013 Ultimate, we're going to get into this a little bit today, with Visual Studio Web Essentials, you're going to have some of this stuff won't be, the IntelliSense won't work in some of this stuff. Okay, so that's the good thing. It'll give you IntelliSense on vendor-specific stuff, like for Mozilla, Firefox, or WebKit, or anything else. Anything like those kind of things is what you want to have details for. Same thing with font face, with custom fonts. It'll give you that kind of support. It'll give you scroll bars for iOS devices, all kinds of other stuff that are going to be found in CSS3. It'll give you additional support for CSS3 in Visual Studio 2013. That's why I recommend it. If you're using Expression Web or Visual Studio Blend, right, you won't have this kind of support. That's just the way it is, right? So that's why I recommend it. One more thing is if you're going to go and develop stuff on JavaScript, in JavaScript, there's a couple of really cool features. For example, it does minification in JavaScript as well as other things that you probably don't know or care about at this point. But the great thing is that it allows you to better make use of your Visual Studio 2013 environment. One thing I love, and I always talk about this as a modern developer, is Typescript, which is a great tool that's sponsored by Microsoft, actually created by Microsoft, and now supported by Google, right, to create modern web applications for enterprise and for other kinds of environments where you can bring your object-oriented knowledge, stuff that you would learn, let's say in COMP100 and then COMP213 in C#, that stuff, you can pass that on into web development technologies. Because JavaScript, if you guys anything about JavaScript, it's very loosely typed. It doesn't have a solid structure. And one of the things that web developers hate about JavaScript is that it's maybe too flexible. What TypeScript does is it wraps around this structure around JavaScript and allows you to transcompile from this object-oriented notation into pure JavaScript. So this is really cool for web developers. And so again, it's out of scope for this course, but again, Visual Studio Web Essentials allows you to do that. It gives you all kinds of other support and other things that I'm not going to talk about here. All right, but again, I would take a look. I think this is a section you can some really cool tools that are kind of you can download and use for Visual Studio 2013. So that's what we did last week. Last day we talked about that, and then I went into kind of some examples, and I'm just going to bring up some examples from part 1. Here's part 1 that we talked about. We're going to make a part 2 today, but I kind of created something like this. Every class was a little bit different, but I kind of made this kind of stuff, and today I'm going to talk about how to add in things like this background image and so on. We're going to talk about that a little bit as I create part 2 of our session, right? How do I do that? And all this kind of stuff. And there's some really cool tools that are out there in terms of creating some of this stuff. So we're going to start this off from scratch again. That's where I want to go, I think, this time around. I kind of did it a little bit differently in the first part of day 2 of our course, week 8. So let's do it a little bit differently today. So what I want you to do is, if you already have this up, I want you to close your solution, And let's do this all again, like as if we're doing it for the first time. I kind of already have a GitHub link here, so I'm just going to kill that. And again, another really cool tool that I would use, especially from a web developer perspective, is GitHub. Two things, the reason why I would use GitHub. One, a nice place to collaborate. There's actually three good reasons with other people. From a social perspective, a community perspective, what you want to do is you want to share your code with other people in the community. That's another good reason to use GitHub. And the third reason, of course, is to develop a revision control system, or use a revision control system that keeps track of your changes. That's really cool. A lot of modern development companies use GitHub as a place where they store their code, they share it with other people in the community, and so on. And as a web developer or even a software engineer, I think it's a really good practice to have GitHub as your repo of choice. There's other ones, Bitbucket, there's also Visual Studio Online. There's all kinds of other tool sets you can use, but I highly recommend GitHub. I think it's the way to go, and you can sign up for free. Students can get a free account, and you can also get a free account that has one private repo if you request it as a student. So the way you delete a repository, of course, because I kind of started out for this one, it didn't quite work last time, a little bit of trouble with it, is you kind of, I'm going to go in here and kill this thing. I'm going to go into the danger zone and delete my repository for a second and recreate it, just so we can start over again. So here's my repository. I'm going to call this COMP213, and it's going to be lesson 8, if I can spell, lesson 8. Part 2, that's what I'm going to be calling it, and I'm going to create my repository ahead of time. So I have my link, my URI, and again, GitHub gives you really cool instructions on how to do this by hand if you're a console person, right? So if you like to do Git, if you're a Git person and you start off by hand, you can do it with this. Again, Git is a little bit out of scope for what we're doing here, but it's a way I'm going to be sharing my code with you if you want to catch my code online. Okay. One more thing I should mention before I continue is I know that Professor Filati had a website that she was using for tracking. I've kind of slapped one together, and I mean that, slapped it together over the last day or so. So it's not complete, but I will have a more complete version probably next week as we go forward. So if I go to Faculty Web Centennial College, and you look at my last name, which is Ciliop, right? I've got kind of this stand-in page right now. I built it with Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap, which is a responsive framework. And if you notice, it does fully respond to the page. I do have a schedule up. That's the previous schedule that she had going on. And I also have this area that I'm going to put some useful links on there eventually, right? I have also, for those people who want to know, my YouTube link for my playlist is also here. So if you click on this YouTube link, then it takes you to the playlist. And I have a couple of videos. One is lesson 8 part 1, and the other one is lesson 8 part 2. You could certainly get there and grab those videos if you wanted to review some of that stuff, especially from a test perspective. It's good to look at the videos. The good thing about videos that I find and a lot of students respond to is you can quickly kind of fast forward or rewind if you miss something. And if I'm talking too much, you can fast forward through my talking so you don't have to hear me drone, right? If you don't want to hear my voice, you just want to get to the good parts, just, you fast forward it, get to those good parts, and then you hear what's available. I've also got my GitHub link here. So if you, for example, if you can't, and again, there's not much here, but if I go to my GitHub link, then it takes me right here to this page. So if you don't know where the page is for GitHub, you can simply go on this website, facultywebcentennialcollege.ca, and Ciliop with a double T. And it'll get you here. Contact. I also have my contact information if you want to contact me. I have my phone number here, my contact information. If you want to email me and so on, it's there if you need to get a hold of me or set up an appointment, which I highly recommend if you don't understand something. All right, so basics. I've got some basic things. I slapped stuff together, like I said. Eventually, I might include some nice pictures and all those kind of things. Just no time. So, okay, let's get to the heart of it. So I'm just going to kill this thing for a second. And I've got my GitHub repo that I've kind of created, and now I need to create my new project, right? So I'm going to start Visual Studio from scratch again. And if you're using Visual Studio 2013 Ultimate, and if you've downloaded it and installed Visual Studio Web Essentials, if you're successful, then you can follow me. If not, we're going to just talk about the code, right? But I want to show you how to set up a project again, because this is probably the second time you're going to see it. So let's try that. So I'm going to go here, kick off Visual Studio 2013. I'm going to click New Project. Okay. Now, again, it's going to take you to this little menu, and it tells me this is the stuff that's installed. These are all the languages and so on that I've installed. Visual C# is where I'm under. I'm going to the web section here. Underneath web, I'm clicking this one. You may not have all these because I've installed additional templates for my use, but ASP.NET Web Application is the one you want. Here, I'm clicking this Create New Git repository. For you, you don't have to do that because I'm not asking you to do that right now. I have a location for my Git repository for my files. Yours may be different. Don't worry about that. You may choose a location on your hard drive somewhere to keep your projects. And then I'm going to rename this thing like we normally do. So I'm going to say COMP213, and we're going to say Lesson 8, and we're going to go Part 2, right? Actually, we'll say it's Part 3 because today is Part really 3. But wait a minute, I've made it Part 2 online. I'll leave it Part 2. How about that? Okay, so I'll press OK. And when I do that, because another project exists, hold on a second. Yes, because I've already created this project. Bear with me while I remove the project, because I'm just trying to start this from scratch. And, you know, I struggled the last time to do this. This was, and you know what? I've used this thing, the same exact thing for years. No problems. Of course, I start this class off, and then there's issues, right? It's just the way things are. And don't you love when professors do troubleshooting in front of you? It's fantastic, isn't it? Not. So it can be a problem, is what I'm saying. So let me just find my way here. And if you give me 2 seconds, I will remove this thing. And that's one thing that Visual Studio does do for you. It removes things like if you already have a project, and if it's the same name, it won't allow you to create one, which is actually a good thing. It won't make a project number 2 or whatever. It won't do that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of a good thing. On the downside, it makes me waste your time like this, right? So that's a problem. So it's in my sandbox, and I've called it. I have a couple of projects. I'm just going to delete them right now. And what I'll do, just to be safe, is launch it again. So let's do this one more time. Here we go. So new projects. And again, this is all the same stuff. I'm choosing ASP.NET Web Application. I'm going to choose COMP213, Lesson 8, and Part 2. Now it should be no problem, right? I'm going to move it up so you guys can see what I'm doing. Again, you don't have to have this one clicked, and yours might say Add to Source Control, because if you leave this unchecked, you don't have to do this. If I press OK, now it's going to ask me for what type of application template. I'm going to choose empty, which is the way I'm going to go. If you choose any of the other ones, you're going to get all kinds of additional scaffolding, extra files you don't need. So please don't click any of the other ones at this point, right? You can certainly try it out at home. I mean, if you go or outside of the class, you can try it out and see what you get. It gives you almost a full-blown application, but modifying it might be a challenge for you if you don't know what you're doing. Press OK. And then from there, it's going to take me to my Solution Explorer with an empty solution. It's got a couple things that is in here. I've got a couple of configuration files that come with ASP.NET. I need these configuration files if I'm going to build an ASP.NET Web Application, but it's also okay from a Visual Studio perspective to keep track of IntelliSense, which gives us more code hinting and so on. Okay, so one thing I want to do immediately, I know I'm going to create the same kind of application as last time. So let's do this from scratch one more time. I'm going to go right-click on my project, right? And I know I need a couple of folders. One of them I'm going to need is my CSS folder. Microsoft calls this folder content. So you can always call this content as well. Let's try that. Content. The other thing I'm going to probably need if I'm going to have pictures or anything else, any kind of other assets, is somewhere to keep my pictures. And I like to kind of use a nested folder structure for this. So I said new folder again, add new folder. And under new folder, the name for this new folder is going to be called assets, right? That means all my assets, my media, images, fonts, movies, whatever I'm going to put in here, right? Well, this is good, but then it would be too much into one folder if I did that. So I'm going to right-click again, and I'm going to add inside. I'm going to right-click on my assets folder right here. I'm going to add, and I'm going to add a new folder on my assets folder. So it's a nested folder. I'm going to call this images with lowercase I. If you notice, I made my assets folder with a capital A and my content with a capital C, and then images kind of lowercase. So I'm going to add images in there today, right? Okay, cool. I'm also going to right-click now on my project and add, and you should be able to do this with any version of Visual Studio, by the way, if you're following along. I'm going to add in an HTML page. That's the first thing I'm going to add in. I'm going to add in an index page, right? Index with lowercase I. Okay, as we did last time, we need to clean some of this up to create our own little template, an HTML5 compatible template, which is what we're going to be using over and over again. But I want you to know how to start from scratch. So I'm going to get rid of this XMLNS, HTTP, blah, 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 and put in my own. So I'm going to put in lang, which is English. That's really important to do from HTML5 and from a locale perspective to understand the language of choice. Inside the head of my document, I talked about putting in, this is all review from last time, by the way. I talked about putting in a meta tag, and I'm going to start in by putting a meta tag with a character set of UTF-8, right, which is, again, the character set of choice for you for HTML5. I'm also going to put in another meta tag, and if I'm going too quickly, I'm just reviewing what I did last time. Another meta tag with name is equal to viewport. We talked about this last time. Again, the viewport tag. And content is equal to width is equal to device width initial scale 1. That just comes up in my code hinting, and a lot of this is because, I have Visual Studio Web Essentials, and because I'm also using Visual Studio 2013 Ultimate, right? Some people, if you use Professional or the web version or whatever, you may not see what I'm seeing, okay? One of the students sent me a note over the last day that says, "Hey Tom, how do you get all these these numbers, and how come your bar here is so thick? Well, how come it looks different than mine?" Right? You can change all this stuff. So again, if you want to add line numbers to your code, which I find very helpful for pointing out which line it is and so on, you can simply go to Tools, right? And if I think it's Options, and under Options, if you go into Text Editor, right, then you'll see that under the language of choice, which right now we're going into my HTML editor, right? If I click on HTML editor, I see that I have word wrap on for you. Now you may not want to have word wrap on. I have it on so that way if my screen, if I have to increase the font size of my screen, it wraps, right? So you can see my stuff. I also have turned on line numbers, right, and so on, and other things. The other thing is if you click on scroll bars, I'm using a map mode for my scroll bar, for my vertical scroll bar, this thing, and I've shown my preview tooltip as medium. So I can actually see a kind of an example on this right side here of what my code looks like really, really quickly. And it also identifies errors in my code. If I have it here, it'll be a little red mark if there's an error, if I've typed something wrong. So that's why I've done this. And I've done this through my tools, again, options. Okay, I'm going to kind of, in here also, you can also set up your, if I go to environment on the top, I can also choose my color theme. Right now I'm using the blue color theme, right? Some people may really like the dark color themes, and that's really cool for you, but I can't use it because it would be too crazy dark, and you wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing as easily. Okay, so this is where I'm going right now. I'm going to increase the font size just so you can see it a little bit clearer, right? And this is the first piece. Okay, now I need to put in a title. That's from an SEO perspective, it's a good practice. So I'm going to say COMP213, and then lesson 8, part 2. We've done that last time as well. I also mentioned something about getting this reset.css last time. Who remembers why I asked them to put reset CSS in the code? Yeah, what did I put it in?
To take away the browser's default settings.
That's right. I use my reset.css. It's also called normalize, if you want to find normalize.css, to remove browser default styles, right? Because browser default styles mess us up, right? When we try and do stuff, we think it's going to look one way, and it looks another way. And then also, if you don't do it and I do it, your result may look a lot different than mine, right? So we try and do that. So we need to get that reset.css. And again, the easiest way to do that, of course, is to go up here and say, I want to find reset.css. I did this last time. And then where is it? Well, this is first link that comes off from Google. The first link is this meyerweb.com Eric tool CSS Reset, right? And in here, you can certainly copy and paste all this, or you can right-click as an example and save link as. Last time I did it this way. This time I'm just going to copy and paste all this stuff just to show you a different way of doing it. So I'm just going to go all the way down here, grab this stuff, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to make my own CSS file now, right? I'm going to call it reset. So I'm going to go back into my Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go into my content. This is where I'm going to store my CSS files. Right click, I'm going to add, and I'm going to add a style sheet this time. Again, if you can't do it this way because you have a different version of Visual Studio, you can always go add new item. I'll do it that way this time, and go to style sheet, right? Here you want to name the style sheet, and I want to call this the name that I want, reset CSS, right? And press add. Now it's empty, if you notice. It kind of creates this empty style sheet, and it's not connected to your index.html. We need to do this in order for us to impose our CSS changes. So I'm going to kind of remove all this stuff and paste in my reset CSS that I downloaded from, or I kind of copied from online, right? And if you notice what it does is it kind of removes everything, all margins, all padding, all borders, the font size 100%, the font, we inherit the font, vertical alignment is baseline, and so on. It kind of returns everything from the browser back to normal, takes away everything. Okay, that's what reset CSS does. I'm going to save that and just X out of this one. If I'm going to use reset CSS, I need to connect it to my HTML page. And again, the quick way of doing that, I kind of asked you guys how to do it last time, but for here, is just dragging and dropping. So I take my reset CSS and I drag and drop it underneath my title, and then I have a connection with my reset CSS and with my page, right? This is all prep work that we're doing. When we build up a page for the first time, we do this prep work, right? And I want you to get into this flow. If you're going to make something from scratch, this is the way we're going to do it, okay? Okay, cool. Well, I've got this reset CSS, and you know what? It's a good place to add in my own CSS. So there's a couple ways we can do this. When I right-click on my content folder, I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to click in, this time I'll do it this way, Style Sheet, right? And I'm going to name my style sheet something like main, custom, or app, whatever you want, something that makes sense with your file that you're building. I'm going to call this main, like I did last time, which kind of gives you this defaulted CSS styles that we kind of took from before, right? With a body tag that's empty. A body tag that's empty. Just so I don't forget, I'm going to connect this one, even though it's empty, into our index.html. I'm going to drag and drop it underneath my reset because I want my reset to take effect first. Because remember, the browser will look at my code in order, right? And I want this to read my reset CSS first, reset the browser styles, and then look at my stuff. So I'm going to kind of put in my main.css underneath that. Okay, cool. So I've got this flow, right? I've got this stuff. I'm ready to put in my structure, my semantic structure, right? And when I say that for HTML5, remember, I used divs last time. What are divs? What did I say divs were from last day? Anyone? Yes. They're container tags, all right? Think about a div as a container tag, a box that I'm going to put my stuff inside. That's what they are, right? So if I have a div tag, and if I start typing div, right, as an example, that's going to be my container that I'm going to use. I used classes last time to define my div, or to tag my div tag. This time I'm going to use IDs instead, and I'm going to use the shortcut for that. For those people who are using Zencoding or Emmet, I'm going to use the pound key, right? Right, so pound button, the pound key. Okay, and then once I've done that, so I say pound, and let's say I want to do the top of my CSS or my top of my HTML5. I want to call this the nav section, right, or the header, if you will. So I'm going to call this header. Here's my header ID. Now, you might also say, hey, wait a minute, Tom. HTML5 has HTML5 specific tags to define header, section, content, all that kind of stuff. Couldn't you use that? And I would say absolutely, right? So if you're used to those things, right, which is the way we should be doing it with HTML5, then simply do this, say header, and that's a valid tag in HTML5, right? There's also another tag in HTML5, which is footer, right? Footer and header is inside HTML. These are, again, content. These are containers. That's all they are. It's like a div tag, right? So whether we use div or header and footer, and if you notice, if I hover over it with Visual Studio, it gives me this kind of little quick tooltip that says the header element represents introductory content for its nearest ancestor, sectioning content or sectioning root element A header typically contains a group of introductory or navigational aids. Hint, hint, this is where we put our nav bar, right? We're going to put our nav bar in here too. If we're going to make a nav, we're going to put it in here. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to have header, and then again, if I hover over footer, a footer element represents the footer for its nearest ancestor sectioning content or sectioning root element. A footer typically contains information about its section, such as who wrote it, links to related documents, copyright data, and the like, right? Now again, I can certainly type in stuff like this, or if I use my shortcut, I will do it like this. Again, I will say header, right? And if I want to give it a tag, like if I say I want my header to have a tag of an ID tag of header as well, I can do that because it's just a tag that I can identify this piece, right? So there we go. I'm going to just undo it for a second. Inside my header tag, I definitely want to have some kind of nav, right? And remember, the HTML5 tag for nav is nav, right? Inside my nav, remember how we did a navigation? You should have learned this with Professor Filati. You're going to do something like a UL, an unordered list, that we're going to style a little bit, right? So let's do that. Let's do a nav. Inside the nav, you're going to have an unordered list. Inside the unordered list, you're going to have several li tags, right? List items, right? And inside the list items, they're going to contain links, a tags, right? And inside the links, right? This is how it goes. I mean, think about this thing that I'm doing. You guys are thinking that you're laughing at me, right? But watch this. Boom, right? I get all this structure. It's there, right? I don't have to type this by hand. Okay. And then if I undo, again, I get back to this. So I forgot, oh yeah, I need more than one set of links, right? As an example, I want a li times, let's say I want my home page, my contact page. I want some kind of products and services this time around. You know, so it's like the classic 5-page site. You know, you see, you know, home, contact, products, services, you know, about me, one of those. So I need about 5 links, right? Okay, there we go. So there's some 5 links, right? Really, really quickly. And then my href tags, if you notice, right here, they don't have any kind of, they're not going anywhere right now. And also from my a tag doesn't really have any kind of styling whatsoever right now, right? So I'm going to undo that again, go back to here. And sometimes I do this with Zen coding and Emmet because I kind of style, I see what I want to get, and instead of coding it again and again, I kind of go back here if I forget. So I need my a tag, and my a tag is going to have, and this is where you use your curly braces, the short form. I'm going to have the thing called link, right? And then I'm going to say number, and if I put in $, I don't know if it's $, or $, I got to remember the shortcut. Yeah, it does that, right? Link 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So I don't have to put it on that text. I don't have to copy and paste and put it on that example link text. Okay, so how does this look on the web page? Well, it's unstyled, right? So it's going to look like an unordered list with a bunch of links. Link 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what it's going to look like right now. That's our kind of our navigation, right? We're going to have to style that in a second. How did I get that, by the way? I went to my Chrome here and I pressed play, or I like to say it's play. But really what I'm doing is I'm starting debugging with, I'm starting to start debugging or start without debugging. There's 2 options. Some people like to start without debugging because it's quicker. I like to start with debugging because I want to get debugging information, right? All right, so that's my header. I've got no styling for my header yet, but we will style it soon enough. Okay, fine, next piece. So now I need some kind of content, right? And I could use something called the section, right? For example, if I do something like, and if I start typing thing, it'll give me some suggestions. Code hinting will tell me that a section element represents a generic section of a document or application, and a section in this context is a thematic grouping of content. And the theme of each section should be identified, typically by including a heading tag, H1 to H6 element, as a child of the section element. This is good content for you guys to understand, right? So I know I'm going to put a section. I know my section is going to be called main content. I'm just going to put in a tag of main content. I mean, I can call this what I like, right? I'm using camel case here. And inside my section, which is another container, right? This is a container. The header is a container. My section is that container. In my section, I'm going to put in another an H1 tag, right? and we're going to identify this main content with like a hello world, right? Let's try that. Hello world. And beside that, remember the greater than sign for my shortcut says it contains this, right? But if I want to do something like a paragraph tag, the paragraph tag shouldn't be inside my h1 element. It should be beside it. So I'm going to go plus p. Plus is beside, or a sibling of, right, of my h1 tag. And then I want to put in some stand-in text. And remember how I did that? I said lorem 50, right? And if I press tab, it gives me that information really quickly, right? Formats that information. Now, if you can't get this, it's because you don't have Visual Studio 2013 Ultimate with Update 4 and Visual Studio Web Essentials. I'm just going to say it one more time so you guys get this. That's why it's important for you to do this. If you don't want to, though, and if you want to type it all by hand, try and follow me. No problem. I'll do it. I'll wait. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub in a second anyway, where you can get this, right? That's really it in a nutshell, right? So far, what I've done. So if I was to run this now, right, I get this very much unstyled kind of header with this information. Okay, I need to add in some kind of footer, like I showed you before, with some kind of. I'm not going to add that. Maybe I'll add the gallery in a second, but that would be a separate section. And again, I'm just replacing div, the keyword div, with our semantic HTML5 tag names. That's all I'm doing, right? It's the same. Whether you use div or semantic HTML5, like header, section, footer, and so on, it doesn't matter. The great thing about using semantic HTML5 is from an SEO perspective, search engine optimization. It helps SEO. It's good. It's for organic SEO that you use proper semantic HTML to tell the person who's reading your website what the hell this is that you're making, right? And why you're making it. So I'm going to put another section in place underneath this one, right? And I'm going to create a gallery like we talked about. I'm going to give it an ID of gallery, right? And inside my gallery, I also want to have another div tag. This is where I can use divs. I want to have a div tag, and inside my div tag, I want to have a UL, an unordered list. And inside my unordered list, I want to have several LIs, elements, probably like 6 of them, just to be clear, right? So times 6. And then inside these elements, right, LIs, I want to have images for my placeholder images that I'm going to get online with Lorem pixel. So I'm going to go pix, and let's do what we did last time, 300 by 300, and we'll use business. Okay. If I do this, I press tab, I get all this, right? Now here's where I'm probably going to make some changes. I'm probably going to physically just change some pictures here, so that way it's not the same one. So you guys are laughing because I'm doing it too fast. I'm so sorry. Yes, I know it's fast. And the reason why I'm going so fast is because we're just reviewing, right? So again, there's 2 pieces. There's the header, this piece here, if you're going to type it by hand, right? There's this section, which is main content this time, which I'm going to use this Lorem text. And oh, you know what? I forgot to put in an H1 tag or an H2 tag in here in my section. I'll put it in now. So I'll say H2. All right. And inside my H2 tag, I'm going to put in photo gallery just to identify what this thing is. Okay. Again, you can certainly type this out. You can also go to Lorem pixel. I'll just show you what that is again. Lorem pixel. And if you go to Lorem pixel, it gives you this information on how to put together these pictures. I can generate the images. I can say 300 by 300 as an example. And then my color image of business, and this is it'll give me a random business image. That's what I'm doing, but it's built into Visual Studio Web Essentials, right? And that's where I got it from, lorempixel.com. Back to the code. Okay, so this is what I've done. I've kind of created a bunch of LIs. And again, remember what LIs are. You've got your unordered list, which is your container, and you've got your list items. Inside each list item, you have an image item, an image, that holds these pictures. Are you still good or are you struggling? Business. Yeah. So I went like this. I'll go back. Here, I'll undo. And I'll put this photo gallery in a second. So for you guys who missed it, I'll just go back to my single piece, which is this, right? And then, you know what? I forgot to put an h1 tag. And this is sometimes what I do too. I got a div tag, and I want an h1 tag, or h2 tag, I mean, with inside my h2 tag, I want to have something like photo gallery. If I can talk today, photo gallery. And that'll be a plus because my h2 tag is contained in my div tag, but is next to my ul tag that's containing all this stuff. Now, if I was to try this out, I'm not sure if it would work because I haven't tried this out before. But if I go $ for business, which is curious if it'll work, and it won't work, yeah. But if I do this, it'll give me everything. Did you get that? Let me show you that again. Remember, if you don't catch it, that's why I have the videos. So you can go to the video and watch it again, right? You're shaking your head. You're like, it's too fast, right? It's okay. Let me know when you're ready. Remember, you have to have, in order for you to get the shortcut and typing it by yourself, you need to go to Visual Studio Web Essentials to get the shortcut to do your Emmet. Are you there now? Plus the UL. Oh, these square, these. Oh, this. Lorem 50. Lorem, Lorem 50. Lorem 50. And if you press dash, it'll add in that. Did you get that? Okay, good. All right, so now I'm good. I'm going to continue now. I've got this. I'm going to change these so I get different images. That's what this does. Otherwise, you get the same image, right? So I'm just going to change the numbers. So if I go to 2, I'm going to start with, I don't like number 1. 5 and 7. I would do every 2. 9 and 11, right? And then if I save this and run it now, if I refresh the page, I get this, a bunch of images, right? That's what this thing does. And by the way, if you notice, there's no image here. How come? Because there isn't 11 images. That's why. If I go back to this, I know you're laughing again. You're like, what the hell, Tom? What are you doing? What are you doing to us, Tom? Right? Maybe there's no number 10 either. Let's see. Because they only have a limited amount of images. Oh yeah, this is number 10. Okay, so again, I got some basic images from this. As these are placeholder images, because we're creating our page from scratch. We're kind of laying it out now. That's what we're doing, and that's why I'm using these this kind of stand-in text or placeholder text and placeholder images. Okay, cool. But the idea here is before we go into any CSS, we do our semantic HTML. I've got a header tag again. Inside my HTML, underneath my header tag, I have a section tag. And again, a section is like a div tag. All I'm doing is sectionalizing my HTML5 code. So when I do I'm marking up my page, my content, which is very little right now. I have very little content. I'm creating some content for us to play with. That's what I'm doing, okay? And here's my section tag for my gallery. I've given it an ID of gallery so I can target it with CSS. And inside the CSS, I've given a layered, kind of a nested div tag. You can make as many layers, if you will, of div tags that you want. It just gives you more control. Okay, one more section, and then I'll put it up on GitHub for you so you can grab it. All right, so you don't have to download it, or you don't have to type it in. You can do it from GitHub, right? So again, I'm going to create a footer section like I showed you, right? My footer is going to have an h4 tag that's inside of it, right? Inside my footer tag, I'm going to have, I'm just going to throw this up a little bit. I need to have some kind of copyright statement, right? So here's my footer with my h4 tag. I'm going to use the and copy, right? Which it gives me that copyright symbol. That's what it does. And you should have known this from, if you were working with Professor Falati, you should have got this quick tag, right? When I did the review with her, she told us that you knew it already, right? You should know this, this kind of stuff. And then I'm going to put in copyright, you know, let's say mycompany.com or my company, whatever the company's called, mycompany.com 2015. Right? So whatever where your company is goes there. All right, so we have our semantic HTML. And now, in order for me to share this with you properly, I'm going to put it up on GitHub. So how do I do that? I'm going to go to this. I'm going to pin up my Solution Explorer here again. I'm going to go to Team Explorer. You don't have to follow me here. I'm going to go to Changes. And you see I got all these changes, all these things I added in, right? So I'm going to say created base Visual Studio web project, right? Just as a comment. And press commit. Go home. I'm going to go unsync commits. And then back to GitHub. It gives me that link, which is right here, right? This little link here. I'm going to take this, and this is my remote repository link that I'm going to put in Visual Studio. You don't have to know how to do this, but I'm just showing you. So when you go back on GitHub, and now if you refresh, and if you can't follow along fast enough, you have GitHub. So you can dial into GitHub and go into my index.html, and all my stuff is right here for you. Okay? So you don't have to do it. You don't have to try and go fast to follow. You can always just download it now from GitHub. Okay, so even if you don't have your shortcuts, this will work just fine. All right, so let me just unpin this one for a second. So I've got my semantic HTML, and that's what I've done so far. I need to add in my CSS, just like last time. So let's go back to Solution Explorer. I'm going to pin this back again for you guys. I need to modify this stuff, right? So we can see it again. I'm going to go back into my main.css by double-clicking or pressing on the tab that's already open, right? And right now I have a body tag. And you remember some changes I made last time to my body tag. In order for me to affect my style sheets, I have to put them all in my body tag. And the first thing I'd like to put in my body tag is usually my font family, right? So I'm going to go font-family. And I'm going to choose an Arial type font, right? Now you can choose any one of these fonts that says sans serif. I don't recommend something else. Like for example, I chose Segoe UI to Homa Geneva. This time I'll choose Lucinda Sans, right? One of these Lucinda Sans, regular or Unicode. I don't know which one yet. Maybe I'll take this one, Lucinda Sans. Right? So this is just sans serif font. There we go. I love the calls that happen during teaching time. They're amazing. Okay. And so this is what it does for you. I just got this from Code Hinting. Now you may not have this unless you've got the latest version of Visual Studio Web Essentials. I'm going to make it a little smaller so you can see. It's this line of code, right? Font family is Lucinda Sans. All right. I'm going to make it a little bigger for us to see it again. If you notice, it doesn't wrap. How come it's not wrapping in CSS? Anybody? Because I haven't set it up like that. So I have to go to Tools. I got to go to Options if I want this thing to wrap as well. I got my line numbers, but in my CSS editor. So if I go to Text Editor, right, and I want to go to CSS, I need to turn on line wrap, word wrap. Right? If I don't do this, then you won't see this word wrapping stuff, right? Because that's what you should see. So if you don't see it all, you see some of it here. Okay, so font family is the first thing. Font size, we noticed that last time font size being 12, I said just try 12, was too small. Let's put font size as an example of something larger than 12, like 20, right, as a default. So this is the default font size that all my fonts will have. And I also put a line height, right? That's the other thing I added last week, or last day, a line height of something like a little bit bigger than 12, right? Like, 20. So 25 would be probably okay for now. You can also use other kinds of units of measure. Instead of pixels, you can use ems, all right? The sizes of an em. And the same thing goes with line height. And when you use ems, they're proportional to the page. Okay, cool. So line height, font size, font family, these are all good. Also, the other thing I want to add in here is margin. Remember what we talked about before? When I use margin for my body, what am I saying? What's the margin? Do I want to put margin here, or do I want to put it in? Do I want to put that with my? Do I want to add a margin to my my div tags, my sections? What would you recommend? If you were going to do it again, remember what's margin first of all? How do I define margin? I kind of put it in your PowerPoints last time. I showed it to you really quickly. Yeah? That's good. It's a space between the border and other elements, or the page, whatever it is, right? And what's padding? Come on, Hattie, do me the other one.
Padding between the border and the page or whatever
content and the border. That's the padding. That's the space between the content and the and the border. So there's a couple of spaces. Padding inside the border, margin outside the border, right? So I don't necessarily have to put it in here. I might be able to handle it with sections. So if I say all my sections, as an example, last time I did that, right? I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to be very specific about what has padding and what has this and that. So one thing is, I know that I have a header, right? So I want my header, this is the first thing I want to have. I want it to have a little bit of padding from the top, right? So I don't want it to have header padding on the right and left because I want my nav bar to stretch the entire length of my screen, right? So my header top, I'm going to put kind of a margin top from my header, and I want to put this in as, like, let's say 15 pixels. Right, that's the first thing I want to have. So my header, all headers, and that's what this means, has a margin top of 15 pixels, right? You know what? I'm talking header. I might as well talk footer because I like my footer to be tagged as well. And again, you can do it in this way. I do it in order of the way the page is laid out typically. And for my footer, I want my margin bottom, right, bottom of my page, to have a 15 pixel border, 15 pixels. Right, top and bottom. If I'm talking about other elements like H1, H2, H3 tags, I want all of them to be bold, right? So I think that's important to do. So I'm going to say H1, comma, means all these elements in this list. I'm using a list to target my elements. H1, my H2 tags, my H3 tags, all these tags, right, are going to be affected by this rule, right, that I'm putting in place. These are all CSS rules, right? I'm putting in that I want my font style, if I put it in, probably font style, to be bold, right? Now, if you notice what it says here, it says, validation CSS3 bold is not a valid value for font style property. What does that mean, right? Well, let's go back. If I go font weight, right, that's where bold should be. And if you notice, I can put in font weight here. That's what the good thing about Visual Studio with Web Essentials does. It gives you this code hinting, which is what I want. I want code hinting, right, to help me if I forgot something. So font weight is bold, right? Okay, I also want all my H1, my H2, my H3, all my tags, my header tags, to have a couple things in common. I want I want them to have a padding underneath them, right? Approximately, or a margin. It doesn't matter which one you use, margin or padding is at this point, of approximately, let's say, 10 pixels. So let's say use padding for now, padding bottom, right, of 10 pixels. I'm being very specific here in my style. Let's see what I got. So if I was going to go here like this right now, and see what I got so far in terms of my stuff. So I've got a nicer thing for my links. My hello world has a bit of padding in terms of what it looks like. It looks like my link tags are cool. My header, I need a little bit of some margin between these two things, right? That's what I want. I want a little bit of margin between my header and my sections, right? And a little bit of margin between my footer and my other section here, right? So that's what I've got so far. Let's do that. So I'm going to say my header, I've got my margin top, and I want my margin bottom. Wait, margin top, margin bottom. Might as well use margin once I start going there. And I go top and bottom. How do I do that? I don't want any right and left margin though. So I'm going to say top and bottom, right, is the first digit or the first space for this, for the shortcut, if you remember. How does it go? It goes in a clockwise direction. Top, right, bottom, left. Remember last time we talked about the box model, right? Top, right, bottom, left. So I want my top and bottom. You can do top and bottom, right and left. There's only, instead of using 4 values, I can only use 2 values if I want. The long way to do it would be like this. Top is 0, right? Or top is 15. Right is 0. Bottom is 15. Left is 0, right? That would be the other way to do it, right? Top, right, bottom, left, header, right? Or I could do it because you see the pattern. 15 and 0, 15 and 0. I could just do the same thing. I could just say 15 pixels for the top and bottom, 0 for the right and left, right? I don't want anything margin-wise for there. So now I have my top and bottom margins, right? And you know what? For my footer, I think I need the same thing. I need like kind of a top and bottom margin for this one, about 15 pixels. That looks kind of the same as this one. I may want to consolidate these footer and header in a second. I don't know yet. Or they might be a little bit different. I may not choose to make my footer go right across the screen. But for now, I'll just use the same kind of code. So I'm just going to copy and paste just to avoid typing. So I don't need to, right? That looks kind of the same. I may have to consolidate these. I don't know yet. Okay. And now what I want is for my section, any section tags. So if I say any section, all section tags are going to have a margin top and bottom, left and right, the whole thing, of about 15 pixels. So I'll say margin 15 pixels. That means all margins, top, right, bottom, left, have the same value, right? Okay, section text. Now let's take a look at it. So I've modified this. Now you're a little bit of more spacing, see? Now the reason why I want this to hug the screen like this is because I want my nav bar to go across this way and fill the entire screen, right? I don't want it to have a little bit of spacing here. I want to have a little bit of spacing on the top, and I might decide to take that away. For now, I want my nav bar to hug the whole screen. Okay, if you look at the bottom, and same thing with my bottom bar here, my bottom nav, or my bottom toolbar, I have it hugging the screen on the bottom. But this section tag has a little bit of space. If I want my images to be spaced a little bit between them, again, I could use padding, or I could use margin, because they're different images. Each image tag I could add padding and margin. Typically, the rule is you want to, if the image tags, if your element is contained within another element, you want to use padding. If your element is by itself, you want to use margin. That's typically your best practices, if you will. Although people do both things. If you actually look on the web, there's no pattern. There's no pattern for why they use what they do. The box model gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to that. Okay, so I want to put some images, and I'm going to put my image tag up here before my header sections. I'll tell you why I'm doing this in a second, why I'm organizing my page this way. So I'm going to say all image tags I'm affecting have a padding around them, right, which is about 10 pixels. Now, forgot the colon, 10 pixels. And what this does, it says all images have that pattern, right? So let's take a look at that now. When I refresh, I get a padding about 10 pixels around all images, all my images, right? Okay, cool. Now, let's talk about this float stuff like we did before. If I go float left, right? I'm just reviewing from last day. What it does is it says, I want my parent to float to the left of my current element. My parent, right? Whatever my parent is. In this particular case, it's if I was talking about this image, the parent or the sibling, the next closest sibling is the way it is of this element is this one. So my earlier sibling, or as an example, this is the first sibling, right? First child. This is the second child. This is the third child, and so on, right? In code, because we mention them as 0, 1, we start with a zero-based array, if you will. There's an array of siblings here, right? The 0th child, the first child, and so on. So this, if I look at this one and I put a float left, it means that I want to float to the left of, I want my sibling, my earlier sibling, to float to the left of me over here on this side. To illustrate that, I'm going to draw a little diagram for you to talk about float a little bit, right? So let's talk about float. I'm going to bring up a design tool. I like using Fireworks for that. I'm going to draw some boxes, and so it gets you to understand the box model, right? So here, actually, they're here already. I've got a couple of boxes, right? And so I have here's my images, one above the other. If I float left, and this is my earlier sibling, or it looks like one that comes before, that means I take my current one and I move it here. My earlier sibling is to the left of this element. Now, it's an inherited properly. So if I have more than one of these, it's going to try to put it to the left of each one. So if I'm going to copy and paste, here's another one. Let's say it was down here. It's going to try and go over here. Do I have enough room over here? No, right? So it's going to go down here because I don't have room on the page for the entire element, right? It's going to go down here. That's what it does. And then the same thing goes for the next one and next one. So what I should get is, if I add more pictures, I should get this pattern, this grid pattern, right? Right, this grid pattern, as much as it can hold, right? That's what it should look like. So the pages should look like this. This is what I'm looking for. If I had enough room, like for example, let's say my page is wider, right? So I'm going to just increase the size of my page, as an illustration. So my canvas size right now is 640 by 480. Let's make it 800 by 600. So 800, and let's make this by 600, right? So I've got a bigger page now, right? Well, you know, if I have the float value attached to all of these elements, first of all, let's move all these up to the top, because that's what would happen. And if this container here is a div tag or a section tag, right? Then my elements would float like this, right? And now what's going to happen is, because I have enough room, it'll try and do this. It won't fit this one because it's not big enough. It'll kind of put it down here. That's what it does by default, right? But these two, right, because they can fit, will fit over here, which is what the effect that I want. I want my pictures to be in a grid like this, and I'm going to put a float left property on all of them. Make sense? So let's do that. So here's my picture. They're all in a row right now, right? But I want them to float left, and they're going to float left within my container tag that houses them. What's my container tag? Let's go to my index.html. Well, I've got a couple of them. I've got my UL tag, which is also a container tag. And I've got a sibling of my UL tag, which is an h2 tag. But outside of that, I have a div tag. And outside of that, I have a section tag. Right? These are all containers. Actually, they're all boxes, if you will. Right? Even my li tag, even each of my list items are container tags. They contain images. Right? Okay, so I want all my images to have this float left property. Let's try this out. So I'm going to go to float left. So I say my image, and I'll say float left. And when I do that, when I go back to my view and refresh it, I get this idea. But look what's happening here. Right? I got this copyright stuff that also floats to the left. Why? What's that? It can fit here, but I got a float left property only on the images. How come that's not an image, right? Copyright is an image. Yeah, it's also a section, but it doesn't matter. It's going to try and float left, right? So how do I fix this? So there's a couple of ways of doing that. If I want to fix it, there's a couple ways. One of them is, if I go to my footer, right? My margin is here. And I didn't mention anything to do with my copyright or whatever. They have this. If I want to put in a clear fix, right? And I want to kind of fix this up. I want to talk about clear fix a second, right? So if I go clear fix, right? CSS. What is that, right? For people who don't know what that is, right? It's a hack, actually, is what it's called, right? And what I want to do is I want to say that I want to put in a clear fix tag. Right? Now this is not a great, it's a hack, but this isn't what I want. I want to put a clear fix, right? Class that copies my stuff, right? That's inside of my footer. And anywhere where I have my clear fix tag, right? As an example, my clear fix class, right? What I wanted to do is do a couple of things, right? I want to do this display block kind of property, right? When I put my clear fix, it's a hack, right? Now, the reason why it would be a class, it makes sense as a class and not as an index. I have to do it a bunch of times. I have to put display block, display block. If I do a lot of the same stuff, that's a good use for a class, right? Because remember, I can have an ID that targets a specific element, and I can have a class that targets all elements, right? This is a good use for a class. So I could create a class called clearfix that does display block, right? Okay, if I did that, and I'm going to put that in here, so I'm going to create a new class. Usually I put my classes as far to the top as possible, but in this particular case I'm still talking basic tags, right? So clearfix could be put down here if I wanted to, no problem, right? So if I say clearfix is going to be a class, oops, not canvas, I'll put a dot for the class, I say clearfix, this is a hack that I'm going to put in, and I want my display, right, for my class, if I use this thing, to be block. I'm going to talk about this in a second. What the hell does display block mean, right? Display block. Okay, cool. I want to add this class to my footer. Okay, let's try this out. So here's my footer. I want to add a class there. I can just type in, I can tag my footer as class, and now I have clearfix. It comes up. See, clearfix. Right, and see what let's see what this clearfix stuff does. Right, I'm going to go back to my code or my display here. Here's my display, and if you notice, here's my copyright over here. And if I refresh, right, it's still there. How come? Right? Let's run this thing, and sometimes you need to rerun this thing to see what I'm doing here. Okay, so here, so that didn't fix it, right? My display block is good, but it's still hanging out over here. How come? How about if I specifically say, and this is this is all CSS, so it's cascading, right? So if I go back to main CSS, so clearfix, okay, display block is okay. I'll put that, I'll leave that there for now. I've applied the class, didn't do anything, right? It's my footer. But maybe what I want to put in here is I want to have float. I can put a float value and put none. Would that fix me? I could. I don't know. Let's see what it does. Because float does some funny things, right? Okay, we'll try that next. See if that fixes it. Still there. How come? This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with this. But these are images, right? Here's my section, right? Here's my float. My float left. Here's my image tags, and when I'm float left, oh yeah, hey, in my my section tags, right? So here's my section tags. They have a margin of 15, and because my images are inside of UL instead of an LI, right? As an example, but they're contained in a section, right? If I was to put a border to see my section, I use borders for debugging sometimes, right? So I want to see how big, how my image is spreading across the screen when I do my layout, right? So I go border, let's put a border to my section. Remember how we did border? Top, right, bottom, left, but I want a border that's everywhere, right? The size of my border, so let's say 1 pixel. I want to make it solid this time. I want to make it black, right? Solid black, right? So 1 pixel solid black border, right? And if I did that now, go back here, let's see what it looks like. Hey, look. My border's up here for my photo gallery, but my images are down here, right? And this is what it looks like for my hello world. Hey, it looks, you know what? I need a little bit of padding around all this content here, right? Because look, inside of here, inside my my section tags, I got no padding. I got a problem with that. Right? And look, I've got my copyright statement coming over here, but I got my photo gallery coming up here. This is a problem. How do I fix that? Well, inside my section, I could put something like an overflow, right? Auto. And if I do that, and go back, this is all section tags that have an overflow of auto. If I go back and refresh, now she's gone, right? Now she's back to normal. Overflow talks about how my container wraps my content, right? If I put an overflow auto, what it does is, there's different overflows, like different property values for overflow. Auto, what it does is says, take whatever's inside, any images that are inside this thing, and expand my box to fill, to contain my images or my content, right? That's what fixed it here. So my clearfix didn't do anything, but my overflow auto did. Okay. And let's go look at this now. I have a problem with I want to add some padding around my hello world, and I want to have some, and again, it could be margin as well, margin or padding, right? Again, the rule is if it's within another container, you use padding. If it's on its own, you use margin, typically, although both apply, all right? So if I go back in here and I look at my footer, and my section, and my header, and all this kind of stuff, where would I put my padding, right, for, that affects everything? If I want everything to have a padding, well, it would probably be in my body, right? So let's see what happens if I put a padding to everything. If I go padding, I want everything to have every element to have a padding, let's say, of 5 pixels, right, all around. If I did that, right, and if I go back here, it offsets everything by about 5 pixels. Take a look, right? Now, it affected it up here, right? This had an element, but nothing in here. How come it didn't go in here? Sorry? Correct. It doesn't flow into these elements. This is a different container, right? I would think that if I put it on my body that it would affect everything. Not true, right? So let's go back. So that's not the solution for this. I've definitely got a padding bottom on here for my h1 tags, right, and everything else. I think, you know what, my h1 tags are cool, but I think what I need is for my section itself. It has a margin of 15, but here inside my section, I need a padding, right? So all my section tags, as an example, have a padding, and I usually put padding first and then margin. That's typically what I do. A padding of, let's say, again, 5 pixels, let's say, right? If I did that, and I look at my tags here and refreshed, now that's a little better. I don't know if that's enough, right, for now, but there is a bit of padding here, all my section tags. Here I don't have any padding, and here I don't have any padding. So I probably want to do the same thing with footer and header. Uh-oh, look what I'm getting here. I'm getting this repeat, right? And especially if I have a lot of repeat stuff, I want to add it into a class. That's the way I'm doing it. So I could create a class that creates that everything inherits, right? Especially if I want to do for all nav bars, all navigation, all header types, all headers, or all footers, right? That kind of thing, or all navigation. But for now, what I want to do is I want to add a padding to my header. And again, I think 5 pixels is not enough, maybe 10 pixels between everything. And the same thing goes with my, where I put it already, which is my section. Let's leave that at 10 pixels for now. We're going to try and make it better. As we go with CSS rules, it's important for us to try and piece part this together so that we don't repeat as many times as we need to. Padding, padding, padding. See? Lots of paddings, right? Padding. For this one, I got padding bottom. I don't need padding bottom. I need padding all around, right? Okay, good, good, good. Now let's take a look and see what this looks like. Can I save it? Oh yeah. A little better. A little bit more organized, right? Okay, let's take a short break and then we'll get the next piece done after this.